Hello everyone, this is Julia. Thank you so much for joining me on my craft room adventures. Today I have a second Halloween card to share with you, and it's yet another Challenge a Crafty Friend card with my friend Lien. This time the challenge is make it your own, so we each choose a card that the other one has posted previously, and we're just using elements of that and making it our own. So for this card I'm using Stamps and Dies by Hello Bluebird. The stem sets I'm using are the cute little ghosts and bats from Frightful Little Bits, and also those cute pumpkins that I'm coloring. I'm using Tabitha for the cat and all the potion elements, and also of course the little witch. And I'm also using the cauldron from Halloween Party. I just masked off the stamp so I wouldn't stamp the little cat that's stirring the cauldron. I stamped everything out onto Nina's Solar White cardstock, and I'm using my Copic markers to color them in. And I'm using YR18 as my darkest shade for my pumpkins, blending that out with YR14, YR12, and then Y11. I'm just using the tip-to-tip technique from the Y11 to YR12 because I didn't want it to be yellow, but I wanted the pumpkins to have a bit of a glow in the center. So I'm just taking the Y11 with a tip-to-tip from the YR12 to pull it a lot more orange. And now I'm just going in with a second layer of the YR18 just to create a bit more shadow, blending that out again with the YR14, then again the YR12, and then going over the center with the Y11 just to give it that little bit of a glow. Now I wanted the smoke that's coming out of the cauldron to be kind of like an acid green, so I'm using YG03, YG01, and YG000. And this is like a lemony type light green, which I thought would look really cool. And I'm sorry I'm going out of the frame there a little bit. I'm still getting used to my new setup and I didn't quite realize that I wasn't in frame. Um, I'm just using the YG03 as my darkest shade, then blending that out with the YG01. For the little bubbles, I didn't pay too much attention to any kind of shading. I just added some green there. And I'm blending everything together with the YG01, going back in with the YG03 and now the YG05 because I didn't think there was enough of a contrast. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the YG06. Now for the grays on my card, I'm using cool grays. For the hat, I'm pulling in the C9 as my darkest shade, but for the other images, my darkest shade is the C7. And I'm just placing down the C9 because the image was quite large, so I wanted there to be quite a lot of contrast. So now I'm blending that out with C7. Then with C5, just pulling it further towards the middle. Blending that out with C3. Making sure to leave a nice highlight area in the center. Blending that out with C1 and then C0. I'm not coloring the bottom of the hat because I will cut a slit down there so the little witch is actually wearing the hat, so I didn't need to color that part. Going in for a second layer, but I'm not using the C9 anymore, just the C7 to the C0 again. For my girl, for the hair, I'm using E30 markers. I'm using E37, E33, E31, and E30. Normally I would also use the E35 or just go with the E35 instead of the E37, but my marker was dry, so I had to improvise. And since I wanted to use lots of flakes on the hair to avoid my usual helmet hair, I didn't think it mattered that there was quite a bit of a gap between the E33 and the E37. So I'm just using flicking motions to create the illusion of hair. Really, really no idea what I'm doing here. I really need to practice coloring hair a lot more, which is probably also why I love coloring critters a lot, because they don't really have hair. Well, they do, but you know, not like people hair. Yeah, I just went in with lots of flicks to create some sort of movement there. For the skin, I'm using E11, E00, and E000. Just placing down the E11 where the natural shadows would be, blending that out with E00, then going in with a second layer of those colors, leaving the lightest areas white, and now I'm blending that together with the E000 for my second layer. I wanted her dress to be purple to match the kind of card front, so I'm using V09 as my darkest shade, blending that out with V06, V05, V01, and V000. Now, of course, you don't need to use that many markers for just one image. I'm not that used to coloring with Copics just yet. I still need to practice a lot, and I find the more colors I'm using in between, the easier time I have blending. So that's why I'm doing it, but you could easily just skip some of the middle shades and just blend it out using the tip-to-tip technique. That will work just as well. Yeah, again, just blending everything together. The V09 was the darkest shade, then I blended that out with V06, going back in with V06, not using the darkest shade, again, just to add a little bit more depth. Then with the V05, blending that out with V01, and now everything together with V000. I forgot to cut the little, color the little stems on the pumpkins, so I'm using BG96, YG63, and YG61 for those. And now for the challenge part. This is the card that I used as inspiration for the Make It Your Own challenge. This card is by Lien. I think it's just so pretty. I love the purples, and I thought it would be perfect for Halloween. So I used the same shades as she did, also using regular distressings instead of oxides because she loves the regular distressings. And I haven't actually used them in a while, so I had a bit of a harder time blending them, not because they're hard to blend, but because I just wasn't used to it anymore. They just sit on top of the Bristol a bit longer than the oxides do. Well, not really, but longer, but they just move differently, I find. So yeah, I used the ink blending tools because I knew I needed the background to be really, really dark, and I needed to put on a lot of color, and it would have taken me even longer with the brushes. But I usually, when I do use the blending tools, I also use the brushes just because I find that the brushes give a nicer transition between the colors. So I used Milk Lavender as my bottom lightest shade, and also just around the halo of the moon. Then I'm using Seedless Preserves, just like Lien did, and a lot of Seedless Preserves just to get a nice dark purple. And then I'm bringing in the chipped sapphire on the top edge, just in a little bit, to get it even darker at the top. As you can see here, I'm bringing in the brush, just loading it up with more of the Seedless Preserves, just to get a nice transition between the colors. And when I'm going from the basically the pure color to the transition area, I always make sure to wipe off my brush so that I don't contaminate the actual color. Now going in with a chipped sapphire at the top edge to give it a nice purple. Just to get it nice and dark, making sure to leave a halo around the moon. I just used some Avery removable sticker paper to create the moon mask. And I'm also going over the area with where the chipped sapphire I just put down with the Seedless Preserves, just to give it more of a warm-toned violet shade. Going back in with the Milk Lavender just to create a nice transition there. And just a lot, a lot of blending back and forth. I just really wanted to make sure I got a nice intense color just like Lien did on her original card. I'm using splatters of the seedless preserves and also of the chipped sapphire. She used white in hers, but since I'm making it my own by creating it into a Halloween scene, I needed the splatters to be dark. And of course I also added the moon because like a creepy halo moon is always nice for Halloween. I just love doing that. Then I put on the negative part of my moon mask, and I just used some hickory smoke to add some like little splatters. And now I'm using some shimmer spray, and I'm blotting off the excess to create some little craters on the moon and also add a bit of shimmer there. For my grass pieces, I started out by ink blending that with milled lavender, but for the spooky kind of scene I needed it to be darker, so I couldn't just use the milled lavender. I added the seedless preserves, and now I'm blending up from the top with black soot, just adding a lot of the black just to turn her purplish grass into a nighttime grass. I did the same thing for the other part, and then I die cut two of the Winter Woods overlay dies by Hello Bluebird. And now I'm just cutting them in half because I wanted the trees to frame my scene. I'm just removing the extra bits that would come from the other branches on the other side because those would be standing on their own. Now I'm just using a bone folder to smooth out the cut areas. And I'm doing the same thing on the other side. Again, removing the extra branches that would not belong there because they're coming from the other direction. And again, using my bone folder to smooth out the cuts. I really do love the little snips by Tim Holtz, but they do leave a bit of the serrated edge, so running a bone folder across is always helpful. And now I needed to trim off the tops so that they would be like freestanding trees. I just used the lows of the branches that I could to get a nice clean edge. I also die cut the treehouse scene die by Hello Bluebird, and I wanted to create a background in the same color as the smoke that's coming out of the cauldron, the nice acid green. I tried Twisted Citron, but I decided just to go with the same markers I used to color the smoke in the cauldron. So just the YG03, YG00, and YG000. Just adding a tiny bit of shading. Then it was time to ink blend the rest of the elements for the inside of the cart and also the trees and the tree house. I die cut, or I just trimmed down 4 little rectangles because those will be the cabinet doors for my counter. I just basically cut down a strip to the same size as the counter. I just trimmed off a bit at the end, and then I just cut 4 pieces to equal sizes. And now I'm just using hickory smoke and black soot. Then I cut down a strip of cardstock to be the same length as the counter because I wanted that to be the countertop. And again, another strip to be 1 or 2 of my shelves. The extra elements for the treehouse scene, I'm just ink blending with black soot because I'm ink blending the treehouse more of a lighter gray, so I wanted the accent elements to be dark. And this will be the background for my kitchen counter or the kitchen cabinetry. So I left the doors a bit of a lighter gray, and this will be the dark gray background. I'm adding a little bit of black soot and a lot of the hickory smoke to my tree, making sure it's not too seamlessly blended in a way. Also using the hickory smoke on the trees, and I decided I needed them a bit darker, so I just went over everything with black soot. I'm using the a brick stencil by Tailored Expressions, which is more of a like distressed brick look, which was perfect for this kind of scene. And sorry, my hat keeps popping in there. And also just using the hickory smoke. This one doesn't quite perfectly layer up when you need to extend it, but I just didn't add it. I left some white areas, so I thought it would work out fine. Now I'm just working on the placement, and I wanted there to be a green glow behind the cauldron. So I'm just using the Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink and adding a little bit of that in the center where the cauldron would stand. And now it's time to assemble my scene. I'm adding the grassy hills to the panel with just tape runner. I'm adhering all the animals, all the elements down flat except for the critters and the pumpkins, because it would just add too much bulk on an already busy scene. I just cut down the panel to match exactly with my card base. And then I'm just adding liquid glue to the back of my treehouse and layering the acid green glowing windows. Then it's time to add the decorative elements to the treehouse, just using liquid glue again. Just placing them down where the die already created the score lines, so it's super easy to line up. And it just adds such an amazing, cute little touch to the treehouse. Also adding the door frame, the window frame, and the little door lock. Now this is where I ran into a bit of a problem, because initially I planned to adhere the treehouse a lot lower than this, and then I realized then it wouldn't have a top, because I had used it like that before, but that was always for like spring and summer scenes, and I could cover it with a treetop, but this time I couldn't. So I just had to improvise a bit and change up the way I wanted to set up my scene. I just placed the tree frames on either side over top of the treehouse, so it's set a bit in the back or in the background. And it was really a shame that I had to pull up the grassy bits a bit higher because of the treehouse, because that covered up most of the milled lavender part on my background. But in this case, it really couldn't be helped. So I'm just trimming off the excess where the trees are a bit longer. And there was a little bit of a slither hanging over as well. I added foam squares to the back of my images, and I didn't use a whole lot of foam squares like I usually would when I'm mailing a card, but this one will be hand delivered, so I didn't need it to be that sturdy. I'm just placing down all my little elements across my scene. Just trying to figure out where everything needs to go. For this little bat, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted him above the pumpkins or sitting on top of the pumpkins. So I just make sure to just place the element down, not pressing it down just yet, then you can always just move it around a bit. And to me, this just looked like the ghost that's with the top hat is just greeting the other, and the one with the little bucket is saying boo to you, and the one on the bottom is just floating towards the bat, just saying hello, and it looks just like so much fun to me. And of course you could stop there, but this was for a dear friend of mine, and I wanted to make this card really, really special, so I decided to make an inside shadow box card. To start off, I'm cutting down a piece of black cardstock to 9.5 by 7 inches, since I'm making an A7 card. So this piece is 9.5 by 7 inches. And I'm cutting a second piece of black cardstock to 10 by 7 inches, just half an inch longer than the first piece. Again, to 7 inches. There you can see one piece is just a tiny bit shorter. And now it's time to score our panels. We're starting with a shorter piece that's 9.5 inches. and we're going to score that at 5 inches. Then we just fold it in half, and we have our side folding note card that is half an inch shorter on the back. The longer piece is the front and the shorter piece is the back of our card. Then for the second panel, we're gonna score it 3 times. First one at half an inch. The second time at 5 inches. And a third time at 5.5. And then we have our 3 score lines. And since this is an A7 card, I couldn't fit a window die through my die cutting machine since I only have the Gemini Junior. So I'm just using my scoreboard or my trim and scoreboard to cut out a window out of the center. I just used a rectangle die to trace a window, and I'm just using the trimmer to cut out the window. And this worked just fine. If you have a bigger die cutting machine, you could cut out a window, no problem. But since this card is larger and wouldn't fit in like width-wise into my die cutting machine, I had to do it like this. But this worked just fine. It was super easy to cut out because the little cutter has like a notch, so you know exactly where the blade starts and stops cutting. So it was really easy to line up. Just carefully placing it down so that I don't cut too far. And I just absolutely love the effect of these inside shadow box cards, and I just really enjoyed trying to make it a different size than just a regular A2 card. But every time I go to make one, I always have to refer back to the tutorial, which is amazing, by Jennifer McGuire, who initially introduced me to these types of cards. And so I just made myself a little cheat sheet to figure out the measurements I would need for a card like this. And I will share it in a future video because I still need to work on the details, but I will be sure to share it soon. Now it's time to fold the inside box piece of my card. I'm just folding along the first score line. Now carefully, because this is a thin part, just carefully bending along the score line and then folding it flat, using my Teflon bone folder to reinforce the score lines and making sure it's lined up straight. And that folds the card in half. And then we do the same thing again with a little half-inch flap. Again, using the bone folder to reinforce the score lines. The cardstock I'm using is the Pitch Black by Hero Arts, and this cardstock is amazing. It's super thick, super sturdy, and it lives up to its name. When you hold it next to a different kind of black cardstock, it's just so deep, rich black. It's beautiful. Now I'm just adding adhesive to the half-inch flap. I'm using score tape, and I'm using 2 different widths to just cover the exact area because I really want this card to hold. So you add adhesive to the half-inch flap and also to the wide area on the right. There I'm just using the wider score tape. You could also use liquid adhesive, but you would have to make sure to hold the card down while the glue dries. Otherwise, it would just pop open again. I'm just using another strip of the 1/8 inch tape just to make sure that the edge is adhered nicely. Then I realized that I forgot to do one crucial thing. From the half-inch flap, it's best to cut off just a slither of cardstock so that it will fit into the other side of the card nicely. So I'm just doing that now, just cutting off a little bit. That wasn't quite enough, so I just cut off a tiny bit more. And that way it fits nicely into the other side of the card. Now what you want to do is take your card base and then fold this panel in half. So you basically have an A7 side folding note card. Then you place it inside the fold of the other piece, and that creates your card. Now I'm just removing the backing paper of my score tape, and I made sure to leave this part kind of almost in real time so you can really see how it's assembled. Now I'm just placing it into the fold, lining it up, and just pressing it down into the adhesive. Then you just flip over the card, revealing the other side of the adhesive, removing the backing paper there as well. And I apologize that this video is so long, but with the mechanism just showing you exactly how I made it, I just didn't want to cut out any of that, so I hope you bear with me. And there we go. Just pressing all the adhesive down, making sure it folds nicely, and that creates our inside shadow box in an A7 size. I just love this little pop-up mechanism. Just using a bone folder to reinforce all the score lines because the cardstock is really thick, so it has quite a lot of, movement to it. Then it was time to cut down the inside piece to fit inside my card, and the inside of the card is half an inch shorter, so I'm just cutting it down. I didn't want to lose too much of the ink blending, so I just cut some strips out of both sides of my panel. And now it's time to assemble my little kitchen scene. Just placing down the backing for the cabinetry and cutting off the excess. And everything in this part will be adhered down flat. I attempted to adhere the little witch to the back side of the opening so she would be in the foreground, but the image was too large and it just wasn't working, so I just decided to adhere everything to the background. Here I'm just placing down the cabinet doors, and I'm adhering them down a bit crooked because it's a witch's kitchen. We don't want to make it look like a Martha Stewart kitchen. So I'm just placing them all down at a bit of a crooked angle. Now I'm just taking a black fine liner and I'm running that along the edge of the cabinetry. And as you can see, it just makes a flat image have sort of like a dimensional effect, even though you didn't add any dimensional adhesive. And I really like doing that for inside scenes. Then I'm using a black glaze pen to add my little doorknobs. And in hindsight, if you're making this kind of a card, please do this after you've assembled the rest of the images, because I ended up smudging one of the little doorknobs. And you would think after a while I would learn, but no. Learn the hard way. Do it after you've assembled everything. Yeah, now I'm just placing down the rest of my elements. I cut down the little strip in half to create two shelves, and on the side here you could see me pulling up my phone. I just laid down all the images sort of how I would want them ahead of time off screen, because it always takes me ages to figure out the placement, and even then it's, as you can see me still struggling a bit, but it always helps me to just figure out the placement first. Then I take a picture, and then I start recording and gluing everything down. Just moving the shelf up and down repeatedly, as you can see, just so that it would fit everything. There you can see I smudged the glaze pen a bit. Now I need to cut the slit into the hat because I don't have the coordinating dies for this set, or for any of the sets really. I just used my brother's Scan and Cut to cut everything out, so I just use a craft knife. And then I'm using the black fine liner again to run along the cut line so that it would look seamless when I add the hat to my little witch. Needed to added some liquid glue, and then I realized that I wanted the hat to come down a tiny bit further. So I'm just cutting the slit a tiny bit wider, and I wanted the hat to be sort of at an angle. And then just adding some more glue, and there we go. Now I can just place down the cauldron in the center of my little kitchen scene. And then the little witch, Tabitha, from the stamp set just next to it. Again, checking the placement that I'd previously figured out on my phone. Then I'm just adding a stack of books to the left side. Just making sure to alternate the colors so that not two of the same are directly above each other. And then just adding the little pumpkin. The two stacked pumpkins go on the right. And then I'm also adding in the green little potion bottle because that's what she probably just used to create her magical potion. Also adding a stack of books to the top left shelf, little candle on top. Adding more books, and then the pumpkin goes on top of that one. Making sure it's all visible in the scene just by trying it out inside the card. And then adding the rest of the elements. There's just the potion bottles, and I just thought it was such a cute scene so that you would have the outside with the ghosts and the little cat that was outside but is now on the inside of the card, as you'll see in a little bit. And you see the greenish glow in the window of the tree, and then it's just like you see the outside of her little tree house, and then you go inside and she's just brewing a potion there on Halloween, which is when I will be posting this. And there we have the little cat that was just outside but is now inside with the little witch. Adding the last of my elements, just the stack of books and the candle, and I wanted to place it on top of the books, but then I realized that it would be, I don't know, heating up the potion up top, so I just added it to the right. And that finishes off the inside scene. Now I'm just using the Nuvo Shimmer pen in glitter gloss, and I'm just adding it to the potion bottles, the smoke on the potion as well. Then I realized that the little hair bands she has in her hair, I forgot to color them, and I also used the RV63 on those, and then just some shimmer pen. And then I ran the shimmer pen along the ghosts and the little band on the witch's hat. And in hindsight, I probably would have skipped the shimmer pen on the ghosts, but you know, can't change it now. Once you commit, you gotta go with it. Now I'm just using liquid glue to place the scene inside my card, just to have some wiggle room to place it down nicely, and then you just press down, and there we go. As you can see, the cardstock is super thick, so it stands open a bit, which doesn't really bother me that much, but you might want to use a bit of a thinner weight cardstock if you want it to lie flat. And I'm just adhering the front, and that finishes off my card for today. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I had a ton of fun creating a card with the same colors as Lien did and some of the elements, and just turning it into a completely different card. And I just love inside Shadowbox cards. It's just such a cool effect. You don't need any special dies. You can just use some scoring and some paper cutting, and you create such a fun interactive card. And I just, like I mentioned, it's just so fun to see, you know, the outside of her little house, and then you go inside her kitchen where she's brewing her potion on Halloween. And like I mentioned, I will share my Inside Shadowbox cheat sheet As soon as I can get it ready, I will have that for different card sizes as well, so I'm hoping that that will be helpful to you. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I will link to Lien's video down below. Please go check her out. She's such an amazing card maker, and I'm sure her make it your own card will be amazing. Thank you so very much for watching and for sticking with me, even though the video was super long, but we basically created 2 full scenes on one card, so those take a while. I hope you have a happy Halloween if you celebrate. Stay safe and healthy, and have a wonderful day. Bye!